Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The steel beams of the half-finished office building jutted into the darkening Dallas sky like the ribs of some massive, unfinished creature. Calder Knox swept his flashlight across the third-floor framing, squinting as he checked the latest measurements against the blueprints tucked under his arm. "Everything look right to you, boss." Marco, his site foreman, called up from the second level. Calder nodded, running a calloused hand along the metal support. "Alignment's good. Tell the crew we can move forward with the east section tomorrow." At 39, Calder carried his years in the subtle creases around his eyes and the permanent tan that weathered his face. 15 years in construction had built him solid, reliable, like the structures he raised from nothing but plans and raw materials. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Calder descended the temporary stairs. The air felt heavy with the promise of rain, carrying the scent of dust and concrete. "You should head out," Marco said, glancing at his watch. "It's nearly 9. Laney's probably waiting." Calder's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "She's at some wellness retreat thing tonight, planning the spring schedule for her studio." "All right. The yoga place." Marco nodded, though his eyes held a question he didn't voice. "I'll lock up," Calder said, pocketing his phone. "Good work today." The drive home should have taken 20 minutes. But 10 minutes in, the skies opened up. Rain hammered against the windshield of Calder's truck, transforming the road ahead into a blurry tunnel of headlights and red brake lights. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the taillights of the car ahead. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Laney, maybe, though she rarely called these days. Before he could reach for it, a pair of headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, approaching fast. Too fast. Calder barely had time to tense before the impact. The world became noise and motioned, the scream of metal, the shattering of glass, the violent twist of his truck as it spun across the wet pavement. A strange moment of weightlessness as the vehicle tipped, then rolled. His last conscious thought wasn't of fear or pain. It was the simple, quiet recognition. This is happening. Then nothing but dust and darkness. Beeping machines pulled Calder back to consciousness. Each breath felt like inhaling broken glass. A tube ran from his nose, and bandages wrapped his torso. His left leg hung, suspended in a cast. The overhead lighting seemed unnaturally bright, making him squint as awareness crept back. "Mr. Knox." A nurse appeared at his bedside, her voice gentle but professional. "You're at Dallas Memorial. You were in an accident. Try not to move too much." Calder tried to speak, but his throat was raw. The nurse, her name tag read June, offered him a small cup of water. "Your truck rolled 3 times, she explained, adjusting his fore. "Fractured ribs, broken femur, concussion. You're lucky to be alive." Lucky wasn't the word that came to Calder's mind as pain radiated from seemingly every part of his body. He managed to croak out a single question. "How long?" 3 days. "We kept you sedated." June checked the monitors. "Your wife has been notified. She's been in once." Once. The word hung in the sterile IT was another day before Laney finally appeared again. Calder had been drifting in and out of consciousness, measuring time by shift changes and medication rounds. When he opened his eyes to see her sitting in the corner chair, he almost thought he was dreaming. Laney Knox had the kind of beauty that turned heads, blonde hair falling in practiced waves, features that seemed designed for Instagram filters. But it was her distance that struck Calder now. She sat with perfect posture, scrolling through her phone, as if waiting at a mildly inconvenient doctor's appointment. "Laney," he managed, his voice still rough. She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten he might wake. "Oh, hey." She didn't move closer to the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Been better." The attempt at humor fell flat in the space between them. Laney nodded, eyes drifting back to her phone. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the steady beep of monitors. "The insurance should cover the hospital," she finally said. "I've been talking to them." "Thanks." Calder studied his wife's face, searching for something: concern, relief, any genuine emotion, but found nothing but carefully applied makeup and practiced neutrality. After another long silence, Lainey stood, smoothing her expensive yoga pants. I should go. I have clients waiting. Calder watched as she gathered her designer bag, noticing how she hadn't touched him once. No hand-holding, no kiss on the forehead, not even a casual brush of fingers. She paused at the door, not quite meeting his eyes. I've been reevaluating everything. I'm flying to Italy with Braden tomorrow. Don't call. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded final. Calder stared at the ceiling, pain medication dulling his physical agony, but doing nothing for the hollow feeling spreading through his chest. He'd known things weren't right, had felt Lainey pulling away for months. But this cold abandonment while he lay broken felt like a truth he couldn't ignore, and tears came. Just a tightening of his jaw as something hardened inside him. The hospital room felt smaller with each passing day. Calder measured progress in small victories, sitting up without wincing, eating solid food, enduring physical therapy sessions that left him sweating and exhausted. Nurse June Callahan became a constant, her dry humor and straightforward manner a welcome relief from the fog of pain and medication. She never treated him with pity, only practical encouragement. Your ribs are healing nicely, she remarked, checking his bandages. Still hurts like hell, I bet. Calder managed a small smile. Only when I breathe. That's the spirit. She handed him his phone. This was going off earlier. Calder glanced at the screen, 3 missed calls from Lainey. No messages. He set the phone aside without unlocking it. Not important. June asked, raising an eyebrow. Not anymore. Later that evening, as Dallas lit up outside his window, Calder's phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Against his better judgment, he pressed play. Lainey's voice filled the small room, the background noise suggesting she was at an airport or busy terminal. Hey, so plans changed. We're going to Miami now. We're going to have fun. Please don't disturb us. Seriously. A male voice laughed in the background before the message cut off. Calder stared at the ceiling, the message replaying in his mind. Not a word about his condition. Not a question about his recovery. Just please don't disturb us. 15 years together ended with the casual cruelty of an afterthought. He reached for his phone again, ignoring the pain shooting through his ribs. With methodical precision, he opened his banking app. Facial recognition confirmed his identity, and he began the process of locking down their joint accounts. Credit cards. Suspended. Savings account. Transfer to personal account complete. Investment portfolio. Access restricted. Each tap on the screen felt like laying a brick in a wall between his past and whatever came next. Not revenge, protection. Self-preservation. When June returned for her evening rounds, she found Calder sitting up straighter, his eyes clearer than they'd been since admission. Good news? She asked, noting the change. No, Calder replied, setting his phone down. Just finally doing what needs to be done. The Miami sun beat down mercilessly on Ocean Drive, casting harsh shadows across the Art Deco buildings. Inside a trendy rooftop bar, Braden Hale raised his hand to order another round of overpriced cocktails. The T35, Braden cultivated the carefully curated aesthetic of a successful lifestyle influencer. Designer sunglasses, strategically distressed jeans, tattoos peeking from beneath a linen shirt, unbuttoned, one button too many. His Instagram feed was a catalog of exotic locations, exclusive parties, and authentic moments that took 30 takes to perfect. Another round for me and the lady, he told the bartender, sliding his arm around Lainey's waist. Put on my tab. Lainey smiled, raising her phone to capture the perfect selfie against the Miami skyline. This view is everything. My followers are going to die. The bartender returned with their drinks and the bill. Braden casually pulled out his credit card, the premium black one. Lainey had noticed him flashing since they'd arrived in Miami. Sorry, sir. The card's been declined. Braden's smile faltered. That's impossible. Try again. The bartender swiped again, waited, then shook his head. Still declined. Fine. Braden pulled out another card, a slight flush creeping up his neck. Use this one. Lainey watched, her own smile becoming fixed as the second card also came back declined. Then the third. Is there a problem? She asked quietly. System error. Braden mumbled, pulling out cash to cover the bill. Let's go. Back in their hotel room, a luxury suite with views of the Atlantic, the reality began to sink in. Lainey sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, as Braden paced. All of them declined? How is that possible? Braden ran a hand through his carefully tousled hair. I don't know. The bank must have flagged the charges as suspicious or something. Lainey's fingers moved rapidly over her phone screen as she checked her own accounts. Her face paled. Braden. Her voice wavered. I can't access anything. Our joint accounts, my credit cards linked to the household accounts, everything's locked. What do you mean locked? I can't get in. Panic edged into her voice. The only account I can access is my personal one, and there's barely anything in it. Understanding dawned on Braden's face. Calder. Lainey was already dialing her husband's number. Once, twice, 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. He knows, she whispered, lowering the phone. He knows about us, and he's cut me off. Braden's swagger faltered for the first time since Lainey had met him at her yoga studio 6 months ago. How much do you have in your personal account? Lainey looked up, suddenly seeing the hint of fear behind Braden's perfectly maintained exterior. Not enough for another week at this hotel. The Miami sunset painted the room in golden light, but neither noticed its beauty now. The paradise they'd planned was built on Calder's foundations, and those foundations were crumbling beneath them. One more, June encouraged, standing across from Calder in the hospital's physical therapy room. You've got this. Sweat beaded on Calder's forehead as he gripped the parallel bars, forcing his healing leg to take another step. Pain shot up from his knee to his hip, but he pushed through it, jaw clenched. There you go, June said, approval in her voice as he completed the walk. That's better than yesterday. Calder lowered himself into the wheelchair, breathing heavily. 3 weeks after the accident, he was making progress, but not fast enough for his liking. Patience had never been his strongest quality. June handed him a towel. You're pushing yourself too hard. Need to get back on my feet, Calder replied, wiping his face. Got projects waiting. The world won't collapse if you take time to heal properly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. My world already did. Now I'm rebuilding. June studied him, her practical nurse's assessment giving way to something more personal. You never talk about what happened. With your wife. Calder's expression closed. Nothing to talk about. Right. June busied herself with her clipboard. None of my business anyway. They worked in silence for a few minutes, June helping him with stretching exercises for his injured leg. The physical therapy room was quiet this late in the evening. Most patients already finished for the day. She left, Calder finally said, the words coming out flat. And I'm not wasting pain. June looked up, surprise flickering across her features at his sudden openness. What does that mean? She asked. Not wasting pain. Calder's eyes met hers, clear and steady. Pain either breaks you or builds you. I'm choosing to build. June nodded slowly, understanding in her gaze. That's a good philosophy. Not a philosophy, a decision. He straightened in the wheelchair. One more round before we finish. Later, back in his room, Calder opened his laptop for the first time since the accident. Email notifications crowded his inbox, clients concerned about project timelines, subcontractors asking for direction, friends who'd heard about the accident. He answered them methodically, rearranging his life one message at a time. No mention of Lainey. No explanations or excuses. Just practical solutions and revised plans. His phone buzzed with yet another call from Lainey the 20th. In 3 days, he silenced it without a glance. Dinner, June announced, entering with a tray. Hospital special. Try to contain your excitement. Calder set aside the laptop. Thanks. June hesitated, then asked, any plans for when you're discharged? Next week, right? Going to stay with a friend for a while. Until I can manage the stairs at my place. That's good. She adjusted his bed slightly. You shouldn't be alone right away. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. In the sterile hospital environment, they developed a connection that went beyond patient and caregiver, not romance, but something equally meaningful. Recognition between two people who didn't waste words or emotions. You know, June said, heading for the door, broken bones often heal stronger at the break point. Something about the way the body overcompensates during repair. Calder watched her go, turning her words over in his mind. Stronger at the breakpoint. He liked that idea. The physical therapy room was empty except for Calder and his thoughts. As he forced his leg through another repetition, memories surfaced like bubbles in still water. University of Texas, 11 years ago. Rain pouring outside the campus coffee shop. Lainey rushing in, soaked and laughing, shaking water from her umbrella. "Is this seat taken?" she'd asked, gesturing to his table, that he'd looked up from his textbook Advanced Structural Engineering and felt something shift in his carefully ordered world. Calder gritted his teeth and pushed through another rep, sweat dripping onto the mat below. Their first apartment. Tiny, with unreliable heating and a view of the parking lot. Lainey making dinner in the cramped kitchen, her smile bright against the peeling wallpaper. "We won't be here forever," he'd promised. "I'm going to build us something better." "I know you will," she'd replied, kissing him with absolute faith. The weight machine creaked as Calder increased the resistance, his muscles burning in protest. The day he'd started his own construction company. Lainey bringing champagne to the empty office space he'd leased. "Knox Construction," she'd said, tracing the freshly painted logo on the door. "You did it, Calder." "We did it," he'd corrected her. He moved to the rowing machine, pulling harder with each stroke, as if he could physically distance himself from the memories. The change had been gradual. Success bringing new friends, new interests. Lainey's growing fascination with wellness culture, spirituality, social media presence. "I want to open a yoga studio," she'd announced 3 years ago. Something exclusive, high-end clientele only. He'd given her the startup money without question, happy to see her excited about something again. Happy to build her dream as he'd built his own. Calder stopped rowing, his breath coming in hard gasps, the growing silences at dinner. Lainey's late nights at studio events. The way she'd gradually stopped asking about his day, his projects, his dreams, the text messages he'd glimpsed, the unfamiliar cologne he'd noticed, the slow death of something he'd thought unbreakable. June found him still on the rowing machine, pushing well beyond what his recovering body should tolerate. "That's enough," she said firmly, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You're going to set yourself back." Calder released the handles, suddenly aware of the pain radiating from his healing ribs. Lost track of time. June handed him a towel, her expression professional but her eyes concerned. "Memories or plans?" "Both," he admitted, wiping his face. "Trying to figure out where the foundation cracked. Some things break no matter how well they're built," June said. "That's not always the builder's fault." Calder looked at her, struck by the quiet wisdom in her words. "You sound like you've been there." A small, sad smile crossed her face. Third-year nursing student engaged to a surgical resident. He decided nurses weren't in his long-term career plan. His loss, Calder said simply. My gain eventually. June helped him back to the wheelchair. "I learned what I wouldn't compromise on." "What about you? What are you learning?" Calder considered the question as they moved through the hospital corridors. "That I built my life around someone who saw it as temporary scaffolding." June nodded slowly. "And now I build something that could stand on its own." Tucker Rowan's custom garage sat in the industrial district of Oak Cliff, the corrugated metal building unimpressive from the outside. Inside was another story gleaming tools, half-assembled motorcycles, and the distinctive smell of motor oil and purpose. Calder navigated the space on crutches, his leg healing but still weak 6 weeks after the accident. Tucker emerged from beneath a vintage Mustang. Wiping grease from his hand, T-38, Tucker carried his military background, his posture, and close-cropped hair, though the full sleeve of tattoos and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow gave him the look of someone who'd found his own path after service. "You look like hell," Tucker greeted him, though the concern in his eyes belied the casual tone. "Thanks. Feel worse." Calder lowered himself onto a workshop stool. Tucker tossed his rag aside. "Beer." "Doctor says not with the meds." "Coffee, then." Black as motor oil and twice as effective. They moved to Tucker's small office at the back of the garage, the space cluttered with invoices, spare parts, and photos of motorcycles Tucker had restored over the years. "So, Tucker said, handing Calder a mug. Her about Laney. Calder's expression didn't change. News travels. Small community. Contractors talk. Tucker leaned against his desk. Want me to send some ex-Marine friends to have a conversation with a boyfriend? Despite everything, Calder almost smiled. Tempting. But no. So what's the plan? Because I know you've got one. You always do. Calder took a sip of the bitter coffee. Need a place to stay for a while. Just until I'm back on my feet. Got the spare room. It's yours. Tucker studied his friend. But that's not why you're here. No. Calder set down the mug and pulled out his phone. He pulled up documents, turning the screen toward Tucker. I need a witness for some legal paperwork. And advice on liquidating assets. Tucker whistled low as he scanned the documents. You're dismantling everything. Restructuring, Calder corrected. Moving all personal assets into a trust before filing for divorce. Lawyer says it's cleaner this way. The trust is named after your mother. Calder nodded. Mara Knox Trust. Ironic, right? Mom raised me on food stamps and determination after Dad left. Now her name's on documents protecting what I built. Tucker handed back the phone, his expression serious. Laney's not going to take this quietly. I know. Calder's voice was steady. But everything's documented. The business was mine before marriage. The house was purchased with business profits. Her name isn't on any major assets because she wanted to maintain financial independence. Convenient. For both of us, as it turns out. Calder leaned forward slightly. This isn't about revenge, Tucker. It's about restarting. Tucker nodded slowly. What about the yoga studio? Didn't you fund that? Business loan from Knox Construction to Enlighten Yoga, LLC. Properly documented, with repayment terms she's now in default on. Calder's expression remained neutral. The building lease is up for renewal next month. I won't be extending it. Tucker let out a low whistle. Damn, Cal. Remind me never to cross you. I don't want to fight her, Calder said, fatigue evident in his voice. I just want to walk away clean. Build something new without her shadow hanging over it. They sat in silence for a moment, the distant sound of garage tools providing a backdrop to their conversation. What about Miami Man? Tucker finally asked. Braden. Calder almost smiled. For what I hear, he's not enjoying the financial adjustment. His influencer lifestyle was partially funded by Laney's access to our accounts, which you've cut off, which I've legally protected during divorce proceedings, Calder corrected. Important distinction. Tucker shook his head, a mixture of admiration and concern in his expression. You know she'll come back when the money runs out. Something hardened in Calder's eyes. I know. That's why I need to have everything in place before she does. Later that evening, after signing the necessary paperwork, Calder stood in Tucker's garage, looking at the motorcycle parts scattered across a workbench. Building something? He asked when Tucker returned with takeout dinner. Restoration project. 1972 Harley. Been sitting in some guy's barn for 20 years. Tucker handed him a container. Figured I'd rebuild it from the ground up. Calder ran a hand over the tarnished metal of an engine part. Sometimes that's the only way. Strip it down to nothing and start over. Tucker studied his friend. That what you doing? Complete rebuild. Something like that. Calder turned to face him. But with better materials this time. The Miami sun had lost its charm for Laney and Braden. Their luxury hotel suite had been downgraded to a basic room in a budget chain off the main strip. Braden sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, frustration evident in every line of his body. They want payment in advance, he said, tossing his phone aside. Apparently my credit score raises concerns. Laney paced the small room, her designer sandals clacking against the laminate flooring. We need to try something else. What about your sponsorships? I've tagged every luxury brand I've ever worked with, Braden muttered. No bites. Then make something happen. Laney snapped, her composed yoga instructor persona slipping. You said you had connections. Use them. Braden's eyes narrowed. You're the one who said your husband wouldn't notice if we used the joint accounts. He never checks the statements, remember? They glared at each other, the fantasy of their relationship cracking under financial pressure. Laney grabbed her phone. I'm posting about this. My followers will support me. What are you going to say? Left my husband while he was in hospital. Please send money. I'm going to tell my truth. Lainey said, fingers already typing. About betrayal and abandonment. Hours later, her post went live, a carefully filtered selfie with a Miami sunset backdrop, captioned, "Seeking support during this time of betrayal. Sometimes those we trust the most let us down the hardest. Hashtag MyTruth, hashtag healing journey." The response wasn't what she expected. Comments range from confused to openly hostile. Aren't you married? Where's her husband? Didn't Calder have an accident recently? Is he okay? This seems tone deaf when your husband is recovering. Braden scrolled through the comments, wincing. This is bad. People are connecting the dots. It's fine, Lainey insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. They don't know the whole story. Maybe we should just go back to Dallas, Braden suggested, the confident influencer persona fading further. Regroup. Before Lainey could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. Calder had made a social media post, his first in months. With trembling fingers, she opened it. A simple image of a construction site at dawn, workers beginning their day. The caption was brief. "This is the last time I speak of it. She left when I was broken. I left when I healed. Life continues. Hashtag rebuilding stronger, no names. No accusations. Just a simple statement of fact that cut to the bone." The comments section exploded with support for Calder, many connecting the dots between his post and Lainey's earlier bid for sympathy. "He's turning everyone against me," Lainey whispered, scrolling through comment after supportive comment directed at her husband. Braden looked over her shoulder, his expression grim. "I think you did that yourself when you left him in the hospital." Lainey's head snapped up, eyes flashing. "Whose side are you on?" "The side that still has a place to sleep next week," Braden replied. "We need to be strategic here." "Strategic?" Lainey laughed bitterly. "I left everything for you. My marriage, my life in Dallas, my security. And now you're talking about strategy?" Braden's handsome face hardened. "I didn't ask you to leave him while he was in the ICU. That was your call." The truth of his words hit Lainey like a physical blow. She sank onto the bed, the carefully constructed narrative she'd built crumbling around her. "What have I done?" she whispered. "Made a choice," Braden answered, already reaching for his laptop. "Now we deal with the consequences." Dallas hadn't changed in the weeks Lainey had been gone, but returning felt like entering a foreign country. The familiar streets now held a sense of alienation, as if the city itself recognized her betrayal. The Uber dropped her at Enlightened Yoga, her studio in the upscale part of town. The space had been her pride, minimalist design, bamboo flooring, crystal accents that caught the morning light. A sanctuary she'd built with Calder's money and support. Now, a for-lease sign hung in the window. Through the glass, she could see the space had been emptied mats, blocks, her custom reception desk, all gone. "No," she whispered, fumbling with her keys. The lock had been changed, and a note taped to the door informed her that Enlightened Yoga LLC was in default of its loan payments to Knox Construction. All equipment had been repossessed as collateral. Lainey pressed her forehead against the cool glass, the reality of her situation sinking in. She'd left Miami alone after a final fight with Braden, his true colors showing once the money ran out. She'd returned to Dallas with nothing but a vague plan to access their joint accounts and restart her life. Now even that hope was gone. She pulled out her phone and called the bank. After 20 minutes of security questions and verification, the representative confirmed what she already feared. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Knox, but you've been removed as an authorized user on all joint accounts. The primary account holder has that right. But it's my money too. According to our records, no direct deposits from your income sources were made to these accounts in the past 3 years. All funds originated from Knox Construction or Mr. Knox's personal accounts." Lainey ended the call, anger and panic rising in equal measure. Her next stop was his apartment, an upscale loft in a converted warehouse downtown. The doorman's face fell when he saw her. "Mrs. Knox, I'm sorry, but Mr. Knox left instructions. You're not on the approved visitor list anymore. This is my home. The lease is in Mr. Knox's name only," the doorman said apologetically. "And he's moved out anyway. The unit's being prepared for sale." Desperation mounting, Lainey tried the one place she knew Calder would be, the construction site of the office building he'd been inspecting the night of the accident. The site was alive with activity workers in hard hats, the rhythmic pounding of hammers, the whine of power tools. No one stopped her as she made her way across the grounds, scanning faces for the one she sought. She found him on the second floor of the structure, reviewing blueprints with a foreman. Even from a distance, the changes in him were evident. He stood straighter despite the cane he now used. His face was leaner, more defined, as if the accident had stripped away anything non-essential. Calder. Her voice carried across the unfinished space. He turned, and the look he gave her, not angry, not hurt, but completely devoid of emotional attachment, chilled her more than any rage could have. "You shouldn't be here," he said simply. "It's not safe without proper equipment. We need to talk." Laney moved closer, aware of curious glances from the workers. "You've frozen me out of everything." Calder turned to the foreman. "Give us a minute, Marco." When they were alone, Calder faced her directly. "There's nothing to discuss. The divorce papers were delivered to your parents' address, since I didn't know where you were staying. You can't just erase me," Laney said, her voice rising. 15 years, Calder. 15 years of marriage. "Which you ended," he replied, his tone matter of fact. "When you left for Italy with Braden. Or was it Miami? I lose track." The complete lack of emotion in his voice frightened Laney more than anger would have. This wasn't the man she'd known, the one who built things with passion, who cared deeply beneath his practical exterior. "I made a mistake," she tried, stepping closer. "I was confused, unhappy. But we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix." Calder gathered his blueprints. "The divorce filing lists every asset and its ownership. Your lawyer can contact mine with any questions." "My lawyer? I don't have a lawyer. I don't have anything." Tears of frustration welled in Laney's eyes. "You've taken everything." For the first time, something flickered in Calder's expression, not sympathy, but a flash of genuine surprise. "I haven't taken anything that wasn't legally mine," he said. "The studio was funded by a business loan that defaulted. The accounts were primarily funded by my income. The apartment is in my name. What about my share of our life together?" Laney demanded. "Doesn't that count for anything?" Calder regarded her steadily. "It counted for everything, until you decided it wasn't worth staying for." He turned to leave, his movements careful but determined despite his still healing body. "I'll file a claim," Laney called after him, desperation making her voice sharp. "I'll take you to court. I deserve half of everything we built." Calder paused, but didn't turn around. "You're welcome to try. Every financial transaction of our marriage is documented. Your contributions and mine. The numbers tell the story better than either of us can." As he walked away, Laney stood alone in the unfinished building, surrounded by the framework of something still taking shape, much like the life Calder was constructing without her. The Seattle Convention Center glowed against the night sky, lights reflecting off the gentle rain that seemed a permanent fixture of the city. Inside, the annual charity gala for injured construction workers was in full swing. Men and women in formal were mingling beneath crystal chandeliers, a stark contrast to the work boots and hard hats that marked their daily lives. Calder adjusted his tie, still uncomfortable in the tailored suit despite Tucker's assurances that he cleaned up decent. 8 months after the accident, he walked with only the faintest hint of a limp, a testament to both medical science and his own stubborn determination. "Nervous?" June asked, appearing at his side in a simple blue dress. Her practical nurse's demeanor softened, but not disguised by the formal setting. "Not my usual crowd," Calder admitted. "Rather be on a job site." June smiled. "Too bad. The man being honored has to stay for the whole thing." The Knox Foundation for Injured Workers had started small. Calder's way of turning his own experience into something positive. What began as a local support network in Dallas had expanded rapidly, providing financial assistance and retraining opportunities for construction workers facing career-ending injuries. Tonight's gala marked the foundation's expansion to the Pacific Northwest, with Calder reluctantly accepting the spotlight as its founder. "Mr. Knox," a coordinator approached, "we're ready for you backstage. The presentation begins in 15 minutes. Calder nodded, then turned to June. "You don't have to stay for the boring speeches. Try to make me leave," she replied with a half smile. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't escape out the service entrance. Their relationship had evolved gradually in the months since his hospital stay, professional respect becoming friendship, and friendship deepening into something neither felt the need to label. June had transferred to Seattle General 2 months earlier, citing better career opportunities. The fact that Calder's newest construction project was based in the same city might have been coincidence, but neither pretended it was. Backstage, Calder reviewed his notes one last time. Public speaking wasn't his strength, but the foundation mattered enough for him to push past the discomfort. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see the crowd settling into their seats. His eyes found June, sitting near the front, and some of his tension eased. The foundation director began the introduction, her voice carrying through the sound system. Calder prepared to step onto the stage, then froze as a familiar figure caught his eye. Lainey, standing at the back of the hall, her blonde hair shorter now, but still unmistakable. Even from a distance, he could see she was dressed for attention, an expensive gown, professional makeup, phone in hand, as if ready to document the moment. "Mr. Knox." The coordinator touched his arm. "That's your cue." Moving automatically, Calder walked onto the stage, the applause washing over him as he approached the podium. His prepared speech felt suddenly distant, irrelevant in the face of Lainey's unexpected appearance. The audience quieted, expectant faces turned toward him. In the front row, June gave him an encouraging nod. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady despite the shock still running through him. The Knox Foundation started with a simple idea, that when we fall, we shouldn't have to get up alone. As he continued his speech, he kept peripheral awareness of Lainey, who had begun moving along the side of the room, her phone held up as if recording. "When I found myself in a hospital bed 8 months ago, I learned the true meaning of community," Calder continued, "and also the true meaning of abandonment." A murmur passed through the crowd at the unexpected turn in his speech. "Some of you may know that while I was recovering from my accident, my marriage ended. What you may not know is that this foundation was born from that experience." Calder's voice remained even. "Sometimes we have to lose something to understand what matters." At the back of the hall, Lainey began moving more purposefully toward the stage, her phone clearly recording. "This foundation exists because I believe in rebuilding," Calder said. "Not just buildings, but lives, including my own." "Liar." Lainey's voice cut through the room as she reached the front, camera phone pointed directly at him. "You're a fraud. You talk about community while you destroyed mine." The audience turned in shock as Lainey strode down the center aisle, her expression twisted with anger. "You want to know who Calder Knox really is?" she called out, playing to the crowd and her phone's camera. "He's a man who cut off his wife without warning, who took everything we built together and locked me out." Security moved toward her, but Calder raised a hand to stop them. The room fell silent, all eyes darting between them. "You're right about one thing," Calder said, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "I did cut off access to accounts after you left me in the hospital to go to Miami with your boyfriend." Gasps rippled through the audience. Lainey's face flushed with anger. "You're twisting everything. You always do. You. Should we let your own words speak?" Calder interrupted calmly, pulling out his phone. He pressed play, and Lainey's voice filled the hall through the sound system. "Hey, so plans changed. We're going to Miami now. We're going to have fun. Please don't disturb us. Seriously." The male laughter that followed echoed in the shocked silence of the ballroom. Lainey stood frozen, her phone still recording but forgotten in her hand. "That message," Calder continued quietly, "was sent while I was still in intensive care with broken bones and internal bleeding. 3 days after my accident." The room remained utterly silent. "I didn't come here tonight to rehash personal history," Calder said, returning to the audience. "I came to talk about building something positive from pain, about finding strength in community when individual relationships fail us." He glanced at Lainey, who stood immobile, the color drained from her face as she realized how thoroughly she had miscalculated. "Security will show you out now," he said simply. "Please don't disturb us. Seriously." As security gently but firmly escorted Lainey from the hall, Calder returned to his prepared speech, his voice steady. But something had shifted in the room, a current of sympathy and respect that hadn't been there before. Later, as journalists approached him with questions about the incident, Calder deflected with quiet dignity. Tonight isn't about my personal life. It's about the foundation and the people it serves. But the story was already spreading, phone videos of the confrontation uploading to social media. Laney's own recording now working against her, as it showed her disruption of a charity event. June found him at the edge of the room, away from the crowd. "You okay?" she asked simply. Calder nodded. "Better than I expected to be. You knew she'd try something eventually. Not here. Not like this." He shook his head slightly. "But maybe it's fitting. Full circle." June's hand found his, a brief, supportive pressure. "Some circles are worth breaking." Calder looked at her straightforward, genuine, without pretense or performance, and felt something tight in his chest finally begin to loosen. "Yes," he agreed. "They are." The small apartment in a forgotten corner of Dallas bore no resemblance to the luxury accommodations Braden Hale had once flaunted on his social media accounts. The walls needed paint, the furniture was secondhand, and the lighting did nothing to flatter his carefully maintained appearance. But it was the lighting that concerned him now as he adjusted his phone on its makeshift stand, books stacked on a wobbly table, and checked the frame. His followers had dwindled from hundreds of thousands to barely 5 digits in a month since Miami, but he was determined to rebuild his brand. "Hey, Transformation Nation," he began, summoning enthusiasm he didn't feel. "Today we're talking about authentic reinvention, about rising from the ashes stronger than before." The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, he'd been living the influencer dream: paid partnerships, comp hotel stays, VIP treatment at clubs from Los Angeles to New York. Now he was working part-time at a supplement store and struggling to maintain the illusion of success for his remaining followers. He continued his recording, offering vague motivational platitudes about persistence and authenticity, carefully avoiding any mention of the scandal that had tanked his career. The viral video of Laney being escorted from the charity gala, combined with the damning voice message, had made them both toxic to brands overnight. The one blessing was that Laney had left him before it all blew up, sparing him the worst of the association. He'd been able to position himself as another victim of her choices, a narrative that wasn't entirely false, though it conveniently omitted his own role in the affair. After finishing the recording, Braden checked his email, hope flaring briefly at a message from a former brand partner. It died as he read the polite rejection of his pitch for a comeback collaboration. Almost without conscious decision, he found himself Googling Calder Knox. The search returned recent news articles about the foundation's success, images of construction projects bearing the Knox Construction logo, and a feature in a business magazine about rebuilding after personal and professional setbacks. In every photo, Calder looked solid, successful, and completely moved on. Braden's fingers hovered over his phone. Before he could reconsider, he was dialing Calder's number obtained months ago from Laney's phone while she slept. To his surprise, Calder answered on the third ring. "Knox." The voice was neutral, professional. "Calder." Braden tried to sound confident, friendly. "It's Braden Hale." A pause. "What do you want?" No anger, Braden noted. No emotion at all. Just a simple question. "I've been thinking," Braden began, pacing his small living room, "about everything that happened, and I wanted to clear the air." "There's nothing to clear. Look, I know things got messy. With Laney, the whole situation." Braden shifted to his persuasive voice, the one that had once convinced luxury hotels to comp his stays. "But I think there's an opportunity here. For both of us." "What kind of opportunity?" Calder's tone remained neutral, but he hadn't hung up yet. "A collaboration. Your foundation is doing amazing things, and I still have a platform. We could create content around second chances, rebuilding after setbacks, themes that resonate with both our audiences." The silence that followed stretched so long that Braden checked to see if the call had dropped. "You want to use my foundation to rehabilitate your image," Calder finally said, the statement not a question. "I wouldn't put it like that," Braden backpedaled. "It's more about shared values, mutual benefit." "What exactly did you think would happen here?" Calder asked, genuine curiosity in his voice now. That I'd welcome a partnership with the man who was with my wife while I was in intensive care? Put so bluntly, the absurdity of the proposal hit Braden full force. But he'd committed now, and retreating would only make him look worse. People love redemption stories, he tried, and moving past anger, working together, that would be powerful content. This isn't a rivalry, Calder said, his voice almost gentle in its finality. I'm already done. You're just catching up. The call ended, leaving Braden standing in his shabby apartment, the carefully constructed narrative of his future collapsing around him. 2 weeks later. Unable to make rent, he packed his few remaining possessions and moved back to his parents' house in Houston, the final admission that the life he'd built on appearances had no foundation to support it. The Texas countryside rolled past the truck window, autumn turning the landscape golden. Calder drove the familiar roads with muscle memory, his mind elsewhere. A year had passed since the accident. A year of rebuilding, restructuring, reclaiming. The divorce was finalized. The foundation was thriving. Knox Construction had expanded to 3 cities, and now he was going home, not to Dallas, but to the small town outside Austin where he'd grown up, where his mother still lived in the same modest house, stubbornly independent at 65. Mara Knox was waiting on the porch as he pulled into the gravel driveway, her slight frame belying the strength that had raised him alone after his father abandoned them when Calder was 8. "You're late," she called as he climbed out of the truck. "I expected you an hour ago." "Traffic near Austin," Calder replied, embracing her. "You look good, Mom." "Liar." She smiled, the creases around her eyes deepening. "But you can stay anyway." They settled on the porch with coffee black, no sugar, the way they both preferred it. The house needed paint, and the steps were sagging, Calder noticed. He made a mental note to send a crew out before winter. "So," Mara said, studying him over the rim of her mug. "Seattle treating you well?" "It's good. Different from Texas. Rains more." "And the nurse?" "June." Calder's lips quirked slightly. His mother had always been direct. "She's good too. Just good." Mara raised an eyebrow. "We're taking it slow, building something solid." He looked out over the yard, to the oak tree he'd climbed as a boy. "I'm not making the same mistakes again." Mara nodded, understanding in her weathered face. "Not all marriages are like yours and Laney's, you know. Some people build together instead of using each other as scaffolding." Calder looked at his mother with surprise. "That's almost exactly what I said to June once." "Great minds." Mara sipped her coffee. "Or maybe you're more like me than either of us realized." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the Texas sun warming the porch despite the autumn chill. "I got the trust paperwork," Mara finally said, naming everything after me that was unexpected. It made sense. Calder set his mug down. "You taught me everything important. How to stand on my own. How to build things that last." Mara's eyes softened. "I did my best with what I had. That's all any of us can do." Calder leaned back in his chair. "I came close to losing myself when Laney left. Wanted to tear everything down, start over completely. But you didn't." "No, I salvaged the foundation, rebuilt on what was still strong." He met his mother's gaze directly. "Like you did after Dad left." Mara reached across the space between them, her work-worn hand covering his. "You're not the boy who built things for others anymore." Alder nodded slowly, the truth of her words settling into place like the final beam in a well-designed structure. "Now I build for people who build with me," he replied. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the porch as mother and son sat together, 2 builders surveying the frameworks of their lives, one nearing completion, one still taking shape, both sturdy enough to weather whatever storms might come. The Seattle construction site hummed with activity, workers moving with purpose despite the characteristic drizzle that fell from gray skies. The half-completed veterans housing project was taking shape, the bones of what would become homes for men and women who had served their country and now found themselves without solid ground to stand on. Calder moved through the site with practiced ease, checking measurements, conferring with foremen, his limp now barely noticeable except on cold mornings like this one. At 40, he carried his experiences in the subtle lines around his eyes and the occasional gray at his temples. But there was a certainty to his movements that hadn't been there before, the confidence of a man who had fallen, gotten up, and discovered himself stronger for it. Inspection passed on the East Wing foundations. Marco called, crossing the muddy ground with a clipboard in hand. The foreman had followed Calder from Dallas to Seattle, bringing his expertise and loyalty to the new branch of Knox Construction. Good. Let's get the framing started tomorrow if the weather holds. Calder reviewed the paperwork, making a note on his tablet. Mr. Knox, a voice called from the site entrance. June approached, carrying 2 travel mugs, her practical nursing shoes somehow navigating the uneven ground with grace. She'd taken a position at Seattle General when they moved, her career advancing alongside his expanded business. Thought you could use this, she said, handing him one of the mugs. Triple shot. You were up early. Calder accepted the coffee with a smile that softened his features. Meeting with the Veterans Committee. They had some design requests. All accommodated, I assume, June said, knowing him well enough to predict the answer. Within structural possibilities, yes. He took a sip of the coffee. Thanks for this. They stood together, watching the organized chaos of the construction site, a dance of machinery, materials, and human effort all directed toward a common purpose. It's going to be good, June said, her eyes on the emerging structure. Something that matters. Calder nodded, feeling the rightness of her words. The past 18 months had transformed him in ways the accident itself never could. The physical injuries had healed. The emotional wounds had scarred over, leaving him more resilient where they had once been rawed. A shout drew their attention. A young apprentice, barely 20, new to the crew, had tripped over a stack of lumber, sprawling face first into the mud. The other workers laughed good-naturedly as the young man pushed himself up, his face red with embarrassment beneath the mud. I should go check on him, Calder said. Handing his coffee back to June, he crossed to where the young man was brushing himself off, cursing under his breath. First week, Calder asked. The apprentice looked up, recognition and mortification crossing his features as he realized who was addressing him. Yes, sir. Sorry about that. I'm still getting used to the site. What's your name? Ethan, sir. Ethan Reyes. Calder nodded. No need for, sir, Ethan. I started exactly where you are. Tripped over my own boots more times than I can count. The young man straightened slightly, some of the embarrassment fading. It won't happen again. I'm committed to this job. Good. But when you do fall, and everyone does, remember it's what you do next that matters. Calder extended a hand, helping Ethan fully to his feet. You can either stay on the ground or build from here. Your call. Something in the simple wisdom connected, and Ethan nodded with newfound determination. Build from here. Yes, yes. As Calder rejoined June, she was watching him with a knowing look. What? He asked, reclaiming his coffee. Nothing, she replied, though her eyes held warmth. Just recognizing good materials when I see them. Together they surveyed the site, not just the physical structure taking shape, but the community being built around it. Workers of different backgrounds and skills, all contributing to something larger than themselves. Something that would last. Calder felt the subtle weight of June's hand against his, a quiet presence that asked nothing and offered everything. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something entirely new. Something built on a foundation that could weather any storm. When the dust had settled from all that had broken in his life, this was what remained, not ruins to be cleared away, but the groundwork for something stronger. Something real, something built to last.